First of all, welcome, thanks very much. I have never been in such a grand setting in my life speaking. It's amazing. The last time I was here it was Strictly Come Dancing, so although I was very tempted when the Keeley music was on a wee while ago, but luckily I didn't go for that. Okay, thanks very much for coming along this afternoon. My name's Evelyn Boyd. I'm Communications Manager at the Big Lottery Fund in Scotland. And before I start, I thought maybe it would just be a good idea to get a bit of an idea of who you are. And we're going to go around the room and ask for introductions. But just if you could put your hand up if you've had, or if you've not, actually that might be easier, if you've never applied for Big Lottery funding in the past. That's quite a lot. So what I'll try and do is, it's going to be a bit of a mix today. There's obviously quite a few people that are quite experienced in lottery funding, and some I won't name names. Julie probably know more than I do. But what I'm going to do is give you a brief overview of the funding that we have open, available at the moment, and concentrate on our new funding programmes which launched in November. And then I'm going to do a bit of a quiz at the end, test to see if you've been listening. And I know everyone says this is the graveyard slot, so that will be a bit of a test for you. And also we've got a special guest appearance. Andy from Acoslo is going to do a couple of slides at the end, so that's going to be where we are. And I'll try not to fly through it too fast. Okay, so Big Lottery Scotland funding. Thought it's easier just to talk about the money. That's kind of what people want me to go into programme names and all that kind of stuff, but really it's easier just to start off with the kind of range of funding available in terms of size. So we've got small grants. That means for us that's under £10,000, and I know for a lot of organisations out there that is not small at all. That's a huge amount of money and you can make a huge amount of impact with it, but for us internally we call that our small grants. And then last year in November, we launched for the first time our medium grants programme, and this is, I suppose, testament that we actually do listen. People have been telling us for years and years there was too big a jump between our small grants and our big up to £1 million, and they needed a kind of stepping stone in the middle. So that's what we've done, and we've got our medium grants programmes. And then we go on to the large grants. So they're 150,000 upwards to £1 million. And then we also in Scotland administer a few other funds on behalf of other people, mainly Scottish Government. I'll talk a wee bit about them later on. So we do fund all sorts. There's a lot of urban myths go around about things that the lottery doesn't fund, that we don't fund staff and we don't fund specific areas because they're not high on the index of multiple deprivation. Or someone told me this morning they'd been told that Western Bartonshire had way too much money, so they were not getting any more lottery funding. So all of those rumours are basically rubbish. We do fund all sorts in all sorts of areas. So again, just to talk a wee bit about the kind of timescales and how quickly you can get a decision. Small grants is just a one application form, and it's a maximum of 4 months from you submitting your application to getting your decision. And we try to get back to you well within that 4 months. Medium grants, again, is just a one application form, one stage process, and we're saying 4 months just now. Right now, because it's a new programme, we're able to get back to people quicker because we don't have the volume of applications that I'm sure we will see, but it's 4 months max. And then our large grants, obviously you're asking for a bit more money, we need a bit more information, need to get a bit more in depth in terms of assessment. So that's a two-stage process. You get a stage 1 application form, and then we'll give a decision within a couple of months normally, saying yes or no. And if you get a yes, then you progress to the stage 2. So overall, you're talking 6 months. Again, we can be flexible, both longer than that and shorter than that, depending on the needs of the organisation. I suppose an overarching rule, there's a few. It's not quite 100%, but the thing to remember for most programmes is it's a maximum of 1 grant from each of our programmes at any one time. So what's changed? As some of you might know, we launched our programmes at the end of last year, and we did make some changes. We launched our big UK-wide strategic framework, and if some of you were at our Chief Exec's presentation a wee while ago, she might have been talking about that. I was too busy in here dancing and setting up the tables. But what's changed? Well, our language, you'll see if you look at any of our new application materials or on our website, we are starting to use slightly different language. We're trying to be a bit less policing, so we're not saying you must and you need, it's about you should and you could. Words that we're just trying not to use altogether are beneficiaries, and I know that's a huge thing because organisations, everyone talks about beneficiaries, but we see that very much as a kind of them and us and top-down approach, so we're just talking about people and participants now. Other things that have changed, there's a bit of less emphasis on need. We ask why you want to do that. We don't say, give us a lot of information about the needs of your people and the needs of the individuals. Earlier engagement. None of the applications for our new funding programmes are available on the website to download and complete. They're available to have a look at. We've got lots of extra guidance on there. But if you actually want to apply, then we ask you to have a conversation with us first. Now, that's not an assessment by any means. It's just either picking up the phone, dropping us an email, speaking to us at an event like this, and telling us about what you want to do. And then we can point in the right direction. We can hopefully identify if you need any additional support needs and get that support in place from the very start. And we're trying as an organisation to be much more out and about in local areas, to get to know local areas and the organisations within them. Flexibility. This is quite a challenge. Big Lottery is quite bureaucratic. It's public money, and we deal with thousands and thousands of applications every year. So we do have quite a lot of processes in place, but we're trying to be a bit more flexible. I suppose an obvious example of that is if someone does complete an application form and it's for the wrong programme, then we will try and passport over rather than saying, no, you need to go away and fill in something totally separate. So we'll do that where we can. We're trying to make processes simpler. Many of you might have heard me saying this, but I used to work in European Social Fund for years and years, and I used to think nothing can ever be more bureaucratic than European funding. And then I came to Big Lottery, and actually we were kind of close to it. But we're getting better, I promise you we are, and we're trying to make our processes a lot simpler. The application forms I already talked about, we're not going to have them on the website. The questions themselves, I think, because I kind of led on the development of them, so I would say that, but hopefully others would agree with me. They are a lot easier to understand. We've tried to get rid of a lot of jargon. We're trying to put the question in a way that people will understand what we want from that information. We've tried to cut out lots and lots of unnecessary questions. We only ask what we need. We did a lot of customer testing with the application forms, and some people in the room, I think, might have helped us out with that. But we asked people, do you understand what we mean by that? And if they said no, then we've changed it. And the support that we give, we've always given support to organisations. We do various things. We contract out some support, but what we're trying to do this time is offer more in-house. We've got a huge wealth of experience within our offices in Scotland, and we're trying to tap into those people. But we're also trying to tap into you guys that have had funding as well, so offer a kind of peer-to-peer support, because I think having been an applicant in the past to funding, there's nothing better than hearing from someone else who's already been there and who's already done that. So the support this time will also be concentrated more on helping organisations deliver their activity rather than helping them complete their application. We realise that's crazy, helping people go through our hoops, when actually we could just take the hoops away and make things easier and put that support where we think it will make the best impact, so there'll be more post-award or grant holder support for people. And that's one thing I should have mentioned on the language. Another word that you won't see in any of our new application materials is the word project. We're just using activity because we're trying to get away from that project-based stuff. But I suppose the biggest change for us are the 3 approaches that we've introduced. So I'll talk a bit more about each of those. People-led, strength-based and connected. And I think the sector out there, the third sector and community sector in particular, use this. I think you guys are way ahead of us, to be honest. But basically, and other organisations are using similar phrases, or they mean similar things but using different words. So everyone talks about co-production, about asset-based development, about integration, and basically that's what these are, just using different language. So what do we mean by approaches? Basically, we want everything we fund now to take these approaches in terms of how they're delivering their activity and they're working with their participants. So people-led for us is really important. It's about how the people that are involved in what you're doing are actually meaningfully involved, and they're contributing to the development and the planning and, in some cases, the delivery of your activity. And we know for some people that's more difficult or more challenging than others. So the kind of examples it could be, you've got actual people who are taking part in your activity on the board of your organisation. It could be that they're previous users of your service are acting as mentors. It could be that you've got carers or families of the people you're working with involved in it. But basically it's trying to get that bottom-up approach so people are shaping what they're getting because they know what's best for them. Strength-based approach, as I said, this is asset-based. It's kind of got its roots in community development. But for us, our mission statement is still the same. We've not changed that. It's about helping people in communities most in need. So that's never going to change. What we're doing is it's how we're getting to that destination. So it's about how the organisations that we fund are taking a strength-based approach. So it's not about focusing on the negative and the deficiencies. It's about how are you building on the strengths, the skills, the experiences, the talents of the people and other resources that you're working with. So rather than focusing on that negativity, so it's a kind of glass half full approach, I suppose. I'll give you an example that Jackie, our director, often uses around this. She was visiting a project a few months ago, and they said to her, do you know, we would never show our beneficiaries how we describe them in an application form to you, because to get funding from funders, we have to make things sound so bad in our area. We have to describe the people with all the needs and challenges that those people have. And I think that's a really good kind of anecdote to have in the back of our minds when we're talking about that strength-based. It's about thinking about what you can build on and what there's a huge wealth of talent and skills out there that we're not making the most of. And I don't actually know why that moves. I managed to find a bit of clip art that moves and I couldn't get anything else to move, so there's one wee bit of animation in my presentation. A connected approach, and again we've always asked for this, but we're taking it much more seriously. We're wanting organisations to show how they're connected to other services and other provisions in that area. So at the end of the day, and I had a really interesting conversation with a woman this morning from Dumfries and Galloway, and she was telling me, and I said, that's exactly what we're doing. She said, it's ultimately all about the end user and the person we're working with. So it's about making things much better for them. It's not about each organisation working independently. It's difficult when funding is competitive, I know that, but we really want you to make things a bit more joined up. And some groups have said to us, well, that's difficult because the other group that looks as if they're delivering this in our area actually isn't, or they won't work with us. Well, be honest about that and tell us. Don't try and pretend, because part of what we're doing is, as I said, is trying to get out and about and get a much better knowledge of areas and the organisations within areas. So that's the kind of approaches and things that have changed. Now to actually talk about what you can get the money for, which I know probably most of you are actually here for. So our new funding is split into two kind of key areas. One is, we're calling it grants for improving lives. So obviously it's about focusing on individuals. And that's split up between there's medium funding and large funding. But basically the overall aim of that is to support people to overcome challenges and help people become more resilient. So that's the overarching aim of the Improving Lives. As I said, we've got medium, which is 10,000 to 150,000. You can apply for funding from 1 year up to 5 years, but that maximum, that 150k, is the total overall. So if you're applying for 1 year, 150,000. If you're applying for 5 years, it's 150,000. Large grants, same rule applies, but it's up to £1 million funding. We can fund new activity, but we can also fund existing activity. If you're doing something already that's working with the groups we've prioritised at the moment and doing that whole thing about overcoming challenges and helping people become more resilient, then we can fund your existing activity. We can fund revenue and capital costs, either or a mix of both. It can be, God, I've just totally gone. It'll come back to me. Okay. So I suppose one thing about that whole thing about costs is people have said, like, can we get capital funding for a project that's working with individuals? Yes, you can, but again, that initial conversation will help us chat that through with you. We've got a team of capital advisors in our office that can come out and have a chat with you and actually see what you're planning on doing if it is capital work. So, we reckon that the majority of organisations in Scotland would want to apply for that funding. So for the first at least year, we're prioritising it on some specific topics and some specific individuals. So we want to fund organisations and activity that's working with children, young people and families experiencing challenging circumstances. We're not defining what we mean by challenging circumstances. That's up to you as the applicant to have that chat, and we can, because that will mean different things to different people in different places. Also, people who have experienced abuse, discrimination, people affected by discrimination, and activity that's addressing loss, isolation and loneliness. So if you want to apply for funding under Improving Lives, it's got to be at the moment within one of those areas. And we can chat that through with you. So some things that is probably, I'll throw a bit of negative in. Some things that are not obviously in there are mainstream employability projects, which we have funded in the past. But we looked at the amount of the millions that we'd put into employability over the last few years, and we said we're stepping away from that for a bit. It's not to say that employability activity couldn't be included within one of these themes, but it's not generic mainstream employability. So most organisations are eligible to apply for grants for Improving Lives, but we're really keen this time to see organisations that haven't applied to us in the past, that haven't had lottery funding, particularly that larger. So if you've had Awards for All, we realise this is a bit of a step up. So we're really keen, particularly for medium grants. And again, for organisations working at a local level, we think it's probably easier for organisations working at a local level to make those connections. However, that doesn't mean that we're definitely saying national activities out. But we're really, really keen to see the more locally based organisations getting funding through this. And I've just remembered what I'd forgot a couple of slides ago. We can fund up to 100% of activity costs. We love to see match funding in there because it means we can spread the jam or the love a bit more, because if someone else is putting money in, then that means we've got more money left in the pot. However, we realise that's not always easy, particularly in the current climate, to get match funding. So if you can get it, fantastic, particularly for larger applications, but for medium, kind of not so much. So the next kind of pot, as I'll call it, we're trying not to use the word programmes either, which is really hard. But the next area is community-led activity. And at the moment, we've only got medium grants available in this, but the overall aim of this activity is to get communities at a very local level, so this is a geographically focused part of the fund, to bring improvements to the places that people live and the well-being of the people that live there. So this is one part of our funding that is quite specific in terms of the eligibility of the organisation. So the organisations need to be based in that local area, and they need to be run or have a membership of local people, so they need to be representative of the area. We're not specifying what we mean by local or what we mean by community, because again, that will mean different things in different places. But I suppose Glasgow's never going to be a community, but a smaller village or town could be. Again, to apply for this, the organisation should have a social purpose that is about benefiting the local area and open membership, so that anyone in that area can join the organisation. Funding is for the same as the Improving Lives, 10 to 150,000. Slight difference on this fund is it's a minimum of 3 years funding, up to 5 years. The reason we didn't lower this one, we thought to do genuine community-led activity that integrates the community and that can make a difference, a year's never going to do that, so we've got a minimum of 3 years funding. At first, if you look at any of the application materials that are online, we are very, very specific about the board membership and everything else about the organisations that can apply for this. And again, going back to us trying to be flexible, we've had a bit of feedback saying we're actually not established like that yet. We're getting there, but we are still very representative of the community, so we are being flexible on that. So that's our kind of larger grants money. The small grants, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, two main funds are Awards for All Scotland. Kind of does what it says on the tin, Awards for All, in terms of it can fund a huge range of activity benefiting communities and people within them. Sports Scotland also contributes some money to Awards for All, so we can also fund sports activity. And Investing in Ideas, very similar, it's up to £10,000 for a year's funding, but it is about testing out new ideas. It might be doing research feasibility, it might be delivering a pilot project. So that's our true small grants funding that's open all the time. Now, all of those funds that I talked about are rolling programme. There's no application deadlines. You can apply at any time. And if you do apply and you're unsuccessful, then we can speak to you and help you with a future application. So the other funding that we administer on behalf of Scottish Government mainly is our Young Start programme, which is between 10 and 50,000, and it's focused on third sector organisations only that are working with young people aged 8 to 24. Communities and Families, which is much younger children and families. It closes on the 29th of February, so if you do have an application form or if you've got a project in mind that's working with younger children, then speak to us today and get your application form in quick. And Scottish Land Fund, which is closed at the moment, but it will be reopening soon. There's a few changes to it when it reopens. It's about communities getting together to purchase land. It used to be just rural, but now it's widening out and it can be rural or urban land. And that's up to £1 million. So that should be opening probably around about March time. We don't have a specific date for that yet, but we've got some information on the stand. So I thought, again, this might be very much like teaching grannies to suck eggs about good applications, but I could deliver about 30 workshops on this topic, but I tried to combine them all into one slide and pick out the key things to remember when you're doing an application. That it's eligible. So that's not just about the activity, that's about the costs, the organisation itself. Funders don't make life easy for you. I know I've been on the other side of the fence. Every funder's got different criteria. Even within funds, Like, we've got different criteria on different programmes, so check, read the guidance. I think there was a survey done a couple of years ago, UK-wide, reckoned that around 40% of applications that funders receive are ineligible, that they don't even get near being assessed, never mind getting any funding. So that is a huge waste of time on your behalf, and I know time's precious. A lot of people are doing funding applications in their spare time, the weekends. It's not, most people aren't, or most organisations aren't lucky enough to have full-time fundraisers. So check eligibility, and if you're not sure, just pick up the phone and speak to the funder or drop them an email. Again, it's clear about what the funding's for. I was speaking to someone earlier on today that I've assessed applications that are 50 pages long, and you read and I've got to say, education, so colleges and universities tend to be a bit guiltier at this than the third sector. But lots and lots and lots of information. You get to the end of the application form and you say, I still don't have a clue what they're actually trying to do and what they want the money for. So my kind of top tip is, when that section of your form that's either called project summary or what do you want the money for, or there's different things different funders call it. But think about answering these key things within that section. What you want the money for, why you want it. So what's the need for that activity? Why is it relevant? How you're going to deliver it, who you're going to be working with, who's the funding targeted at, where you're delivering it and when. And if you can answer those key things in summary, that's fantastic. So many funding applications start with, our organisation was established in blah, 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 and for the last X number of years, and a lot of applications have word limits, so they spend half of that really, really vital space telling us stuff that we actually don't need to know, and if we do need to know it, there's normally a question elsewhere about it, or we'll ask you. So just try and think about, read the question, and I always think, tell us what you're going to do with the money. And of course, what difference it will make. So funders call this different things, and I suppose many of you are familiar with outcomes. And we are as guilty, and probably guiltier than most, in terms of outcomes have become a huge bureaucratic process for us and many funders. There's outcomes, there's milestones, there's indicators, there's activity indicators, and it becomes so complicated. So we've tried to strip that back a bit. And certainly in our medium, we're not asking about outcomes at all. We don't ask you to have outcomes. We just tell us what difference the money will make. So that's what you're going to do, and what changes or differences will that make to the people and the places that you're working. In our larger grants programmes, we're still asking for organisations to come up with some outputs that they're going to achieve and put those in writing, but it will be way, way less complicated than it's been in the past. An applicant succeeds when it's obvious that you know the people that you're working with and the area that you're working in. And that always comes across in an application. One thing that's a bit different, again, I should have said earlier, in our new programmes, we're not going to just be assessing on the application form alone. We will be having a conversation with you, because we know some organisations, just particularly on those new approaches, might be doing really good people-led strength-based stuff, but they don't know how to articulate that, or they're just not really sure what it means. So we will be having a conversation with everyone as part of the assessment. And finally, a really obvious one is that it's adding value. Now, that doesn't mean that we won't fund something if it's been funded in the past. Again, there's a bit of an urban myth that if a local authority or Scottish Government or some other statutory organisation has funded something in the past, then Big Lottery won't touch it. And that's not the case. If it's statutory provision, then yeah, by law, we're not allowed to fund it. But just because, and particularly relevant right now, when local authorities have funded things and they're not able to fund them anymore, then we still might be. So don't let that be a barrier for you. But we do want anything we fund to add value. So we won't fund something if somebody else is funding you for exactly the same thing. And we want to see that what we're giving you the money for isn't duplicating anything else that's available. So that's kind of probably trying to get that down to 5. But I suppose one other thing is to speak to funders. We aren't as scary as a lot of people think. Before I worked in funding organisations, I did used to think applying for funding was a bit like an exam. You just filled it in, you weren't allowed to ask anything in advance, you filled it all in, you posted it or emailed it away and then just hoped for the best. And actually that's not the case. Funders want to know what you're doing, and we don't necessarily have the time to come out and meet and visit every single applicant, much as we would like to, but we can certainly have a bit of a dialogue in advance. And if you've got any questions, ask. So, we might not have time at the end of this session for individual questions, and there's so many people, but we're on stand 35. You can come along and chat, or you can contact us at any time. We've got a huge range of channels for you to contact us at. We've got Twitter, Facebook, the blog is really useful for you to sign up to the blog. You'll get daily, weekly updates on any new funding things, anything, any events happening in your area. And we've got the free phone advice line number and the inquiries. The email's changed a bit, but it will always get to us. So, that's the end of what I was going to say. Now, I mentioned at the start I was going to do a wee bit of a quiz to try and make sure that the graveyard slot didn't live up to its name. And I was telling my sister last night, who's a teacher, I just mentioned to her on the phone what I was doing, and she said, people will cheat because I'm not asking you to fill something in and tell me. And I said, people in the third sector don't cheat. Your pupils might, but these people won't. So, first question. Do you remember, or do you know, how many grants for improving lives can you have at a time? There's a bit of a trick there. I'm not asking you to shout out. What I'm asking, because there is a prize, what I'm asking you to do is either tell the person next to you, or just, if you're really honest, just say it in your head, or you can write it down or whatever. So if you can think of what your answer would be to that, and I'm not going to be collecting your answers or any of that stuff either. Okay, so the correct answer, if you've got a number in your head, correct answer is 2. Because we have medium grants for improving lives and we have large grants for improving lives. So you could technically have 2 at any one time. We wouldn't encourage you to apply for 2 at the one time. They should be 2 different activities, so don't try and top up the money on 2 different ones. So 2. So note, if you said 2, you get a point. Second question. What is the minimum length of time a community-led medium application can run for? This is a real test if you were listening, because I definitely said this. Okay. 3 years. We said we'd start at 3 years and work upwards. Okay, give yourself a point if you got that. Third, if you're unsuccessful with an application to Big Lottery Fund, how long do you need to wait before you can put another application in? Okay. Correct answer is no time, because you can reapply immediately. However, we would always ask you to get some feedback on why you were unsuccessful, because we don't want you to be unsuccessful again, and if it's something that we can help you, we'll give you feedback. A point for that. So anyone get 3 points so far? Ooh, might need my tiebreaker. Fourth question. Our 3 approaches that we're asking all applicants to embrace are people in the lead, strength-based, and one other. Now, some tables actually have the answer because there is some funding information on some, so you get a bit of a head start. Okay, third one is connected. So I know all the SWOTs up at the back will have 4 now, so I'm not even going to ask. Right, the last question, I think it'll probably be a wee bit more difficult. How many applications have we had to Improving Lives since we launched on the 26th of November? So unless you've got inside info, and these guys who work with me aren't allowed to win this prize, so they're not allowed to say. So it is a bit of a guesstimate. Okay, and this is where I'm a real test of honesty, so you might need to those people who have got lots of points so far, or over 4, or 4, can it be over? You need to write this down or speak to someone so we can verify. Okay, the answer is 47. Now actually that's not as many as we thought, because we've not really had a typical month. We launched at the end of November. December is Christmas. January's half a Christmas. And then we're only kind of halfway through February, so it's lower than we thought, but 13 large applications and 34 mediums so far. So just before I ask who got that or who was near that, I think it's worth, and we talked about this in the office, that people always ask us, how much money have you got? We say, it doesn't really mean anything to you. We've got roughly £50 million a year in Scotland to spend over the next 5 years, but that's divided across all our funding. And actually for you as an applicant organisation, it doesn't mean anything. You just ask us for what you need. But it is worth, we've got some notional amounts. We don't ring fence and say, no, we're absolutely putting that money in there and never moving it. But we've got some kind of notional allocations. And we're trying to discourage people from putting in the maximum. So another hint I could have said was, don't apply for the maximum ever, or if you can help it, because if everyone applied for £1 million under Improving Lives, we could only fund 13 applications in a year. So actually we've had that in already in a few weeks. Now not all 13 of those will be successful, and not all 13 did ask for £1 million, but just to give you a rough idea, if everyone asked for the maximum on medium of 150, we could fund 93 in a year. So that kind of maybe helps people decide if they're swithering between medium and large. You've probably got more of a chance under medium funding, but you get less money. What we're trying to do is keep up to date with our success rate. So if when you're speaking to us about getting an application form, we can give you an idea of current success rates, and we do that with all our programmes, so to give people an idea and not build up expectations. So anyway, back to the quiz. Did anyone get 47? No. Okay. So if you had, you would have got 2 points. Did anyone get 46? Or like, say, one either side. Anyone in the 40s? Did you say under 50? Oh, you big cheat. No, you get nothing for that. Julie Christie, that could have been 1. No. Anyone say anything within 10? 37 to 57? No. Within? Yes? 40. That's good. You get a point. A point in the 40s. Right, okay, we'll end it there and see where we are. See if I do need my tiebreaker. Has anyone got 5 points? 4? Okay, right. I need the tiebreaker then. A few 4s. Right. And I can't imagine Emma getting near this. How many awards did we make in the North Lanarkshire region in the roughly last year? Right? So everyone on 4? This is really for the people on 4. Everybody else can join in, but you can't win the prize. 192. Now that's across all our funds, and that's North Lanarkshire's not the top area for getting funding. It's kind of near the top, but there's about 5 or 6 above it. So just to give you a rough idea, how many. Who got the closest? Anybody got 192? 190? 180? 200 and odd? Near? What did you get? 27. 127. Anyone nearer than 127? Did you have 4 points? 130. We have a winner. Gordon will do the honours. Now you'll absolutely love this prize. It's fantastic. Can't buy it. Big lottery fund umbrella. Thanks very much. I am now mentioned a guest speaker. Andy from Acosvo is going to talk a bit about a project that we're currently funding.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. As Ethan said, my name's Andy. I'm from an organisation called Acosvo. I'm the acting chief exec of the Association of Chief Officers of Scottish Voluntary Organisations. Basically, we're a membership organisation for the chief execs and senior leaders of Scottish charities. But I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not going to talk about quizzes. I'm not even going to talk about application forms, really, because this doesn't really involve an application form. We're going to talk about something called Path to Impact. Some of you may already have heard of this. But in the third sector, then, we're really about delivering, and we really focus on the sharp end. What is it that we can do that makes a difference? And all too often, that we're left struggling with what is it within the capacity of our organisation. We never have enough capacity. What is it that's lacking? If we're going to be vibrant, if we're going to be here in 5 years or 10 years, then we need to think about the capacity of our organisation. So this Path to Impact is a Big Lottery funded project. It's being run by ourselves, Acosvo, and also an organisation that you'll see up there, CO3, Chief Officers Third Sector. They are exactly the same, if you like, as Acosvo, but they're in Northern Ireland. So this Path to Impact is happening in Northern Ireland and in Scotland. What is it? Well, it's a project, if I'm allowed to call it a project from what Evelyn was talking about earlier, that uses an online diagnostic health check tool that will try to check the core capacity of your organisation. And it will look in 4 different areas: at your adaptive capacity, your leadership capacity, your management capacity, and your technical capacity. It's a very simple 146 questionnaire. Takes about 30 to 35 minutes. We would envisage that the chief officer, the senior management team, and probably 2 or 3 or 4 of the board would fill it in. It then generates a report, and from the report, which is quite a thick report actually, it's probably 20 or 25 pages long, but it will give you an idea of what's good and what needs improving in terms of capacity about your organisation. What is different about this is that the organisations that are going to be selected to take this forward will do this twice. So we're currently selecting the cohort, if that's the word I would use, and there will be 50 organisations in Scotland and 50 organisations in Northern Ireland. Small, large, medium, health, old people, across the whole spectrum. Those that are selected then in the early summer will go ahead and do what we call the CCAT, this core capacity assessment tool. And then they will also take the test again, if you want to call it a test, in 18 months' time, when another report will be generated for them. In that 18-month period in between, then there will be support provided through Acosvo and through CO3 for the organisation in Northern Ireland to help you make sense of what the report says and how you should go about improving yourselves. And indeed, then when you redo it, you would hope that there will have been some change, and I would hope that it's been positive change. So that's the basic concept. Also, then, we're very interested in, is there a difference between Scotland, third sector, Northern Ireland, third sector? How will the two cohorts of 50 organisations come out generally? What will happen in 18 months' time when they've been through this sort of get well or get better package? Will, the two be level? Will we be ahead? Will they be ahead? And if there are differences, then why is that? So there will be academic researchers tied into the project to try to look at this. And then really from a funder's point of view, and I can only presume this is one of the things that attracted Big Lottery to this, then what we hope to demonstrate for Northern Ireland and for Scotland are the sort of capacity, that the things that are lacking, that organisations are struggling with, whether you're a new organisation or perhaps whether you're a mature organisation. What is it that you need help with? Too often we go out and the funding are for the sorts of things that we were being told about by Evelyn there. But you and I are well aware that within our organisations, then we struggle to have that capacity. We struggle to improve our internal processes. And if we don't do that, then as I started off by saying, we may not be here in the future. So we believe it's vital that these are addressed. If this sounds like something that it might interest you, then we're on stand 89. I've got some single-page flyers which really just replicate that, but give you the website. There are 2 information events that we are running. One is in Glasgow, they're lunchtime events. One's in Glasgow on the 29th of February, and the second one is in Edinburgh on the 1st of March. We hope, in consultation then with CO3, to make our selections across Scotland and Northern Ireland, and the organisations that have been successful will get to know in the sort of May time to start to kick off with the first of the diagnostic tools in the summer, and again 18 months later. So there you have it. No real application form needed. All we're looking for is for you to really sort of show your interest, and then we will get back in touch with you. All we are doing when we're trying to select the 50 organisations is to make sure that we get a spread geographically and thematically and turnover size across Scotland, and our colleagues in CO3 in Northern Ireland are doing the same. Evelyn, thank you very much for the opportunity to highlight that.
That was quicker than I thought. You've got another few slides. No? Anyway, doesn't matter. Thought you had. Okay, we've got not very long. We've got time for maybe a couple of questions, if people have got questions. And if I could ask if you've got questions that are quite generic rather than about your specific project and whether we can fund that activity, and we can fund that because you can come and speak to us about that. Any questions about anything I covered today? Yeah, I think we've got a roving mic. Kirsten. Hopefully it works. You can just shout, yeah. Yeah. We still want to know about the difference that you're making. What we're not going to... Someone said to me today they filled in a monitoring form and it was 35 pages long. And I was like, for one of our funds? Yeah. So we've just actually been working on that. So we've been doing it over the last couple of weeks with colleagues, working on revising our... We're not even going to call them monitoring, we're calling them progress forms, again, to get away from that we're monitoring you kind of policing thing. We want it to be much more kind of two-way. So it's a 2-page form. We're saying don't fill in lots of stuff. We are asking kind of key things. We're saying at the end of each year, tell us what you've done, what lessons you've learned, so what was good and bad, and be honest, and what changes have you made or what differences have you made. And we do ask you to tell us what you've spent the money on, so you can give us an Excel spreadsheet or fill in a table we'll give you. But we're not going to have that huge level of going back and forth on outcomes. We do want to know the numbers. We still need to know the numbers because we need to report back. We need to say you've worked with X number of people, maybe X number of volunteers, and the differences you've made. And that's kind of about it. You'll see, hopefully you'll see when the new progress forms are finalised, they're way, way different. We still need to show that our funding is making a difference. It's just the way we've done it has been so complex for everyone and so onerous that we're trying to get away from that. So hopefully it'll be a lot better. If you've currently got a big lottery fund grant, then we're still working on that, so that you still might see those complex things, but we're gradually kind of getting towards things being much simpler. Julie, can you shout? I don't think the roving mics are working. No, there's probably about, I don't know exactly, but maybe about 30 to 40 community-led so far. I don't know it's working. Yes. Okay. Someone was just asking about applying, if you've got an Awards for All grant at the moment, can you apply for Young Start and then possibly medium grants and for different things? And yes, you absolutely can. You can apply. If you've got Awards for All funding at the moment and you want to apply for Young Start, you can. And you want to apply for Improving Lives, you can. There is a thing about Awards for All when it ends. We have a priority for organisations that haven't, so we want to see new applications coming in. So if an organisation has had an Awards for All, it's just ended, you can technically apply. Once it's closed off, you can technically apply again, but you wouldn't be top of the list in terms of prioritisation. We would prioritise organisations that haven't received it for a few years. Doesn't mean that you won't get the funding or anything, it just depends on what you do. So the one rule thing applies for everyone. So you could technically have an application and a funded activity under each. So hard not to say the word project. So, anything else? Yeah. So I don't know offhand how many other funds there are in Scotland. I know someone sitting at the back of the room that might know, but thousands, literally. There are big funds, there are independent trust funds. There's way more funding than people realise. And I don't know if any of you went to the SCVO event on Funding Scotland, but if you don't already use the Funding Scotland website, it's a good start to find out, so you can say what you do, where you are, and it will give an idea of funds that are available. But certainly I would encourage anyone, if you don't already, work alongside and speak to your local third sector interface or CVS as they were. They've got different names in different places, but there's a body in each area that supports the voluntary sector. local authorities, and not a lot of people know, but local authorities have a funding officer. That's not just about getting funding into the local authority itself, but also to organisations within the local authority area. If people want to know who their local authority, they're called SLOG officers, which is a horrible name. But they're absolutely fantastic, so I can give that information, and they're always keen for us. If we're not able to fund, then we do try and point people in the direction of other funders. There's a Scotland Funders Forum, but not all funders are in that. There's hundreds. I think maybe just squeeze in one. We're kind of out of time, but anybody get any burning question? Fantastic. Thanks very much. Thank you.